When you want to add color and detail to your models, you need to explore materials. And in order to apply materials, we need to be in Cinema 4D. So let's go to the project panel and make sure we have materials.c4d selected, then press Command E or Control E on Windows to edit the original file. Once in Cinema, go to the upper right corner in the Objects panel. At the top you'll see we have bars, etc., which is a null object. If we expand that to null, you can see I have a couple of primitive objects that make up those different models. And they're bent with the bend former. Let's go ahead and collapse that. Our H+ logo is an extruded Illustrator file. If we open that up, you'll see we have a null object that contains different splines. This is always a dead giveaway, that this was an extrude NURBS object created from an Illustrator file. I bring this up because we can apply textures differently based on the type of model that's in the scene. Let's go ahead and collapse our Plus logo, and to create our first material, we need to go down to the Material Manager in the lower left corner of the interface. If you click on the Create option, we have an option to create new material. Let's do that for now. When you create your first material, you can rename that material just by double-clicking on the name. Let's call this Base. This will be our base material for our object. Now, if we double-click on the material, we'll have the Material Editor. This is where I want you to look when you're first getting comfortable creating different materials. Notice on the left-hand side we have channels. These channels will offer different levels of control to create that material. For now, let's make sure we have color selected and change the color. I want to change it to the blues. So let's go ahead and click in the color well and crank through the hues until we get to the blues, and then we'll just click in the blue area and click OK. If we look back in our channels, the only other channel that's selected is Specular. This controls this highlight on our model. Now by default the mode is plastic and the specular highlight is kind of wide. Let's increase the height, and that's going to give you a little bit more pop to the dimensionality of this material. When you apply materials to objects, it's these settings that help actually define that object in a 3D environment. Now, I want to change the width down a little bit for our specular highlight, and that's going to give it a little bit more of that polished shine look. There's another channel we should check out, and that's transparency. If you select transparency, it's automatically going to make it completely transparent. I don't want that, so I'll bring the brightness down just by clicking and dragging on the slider. Now this makes it semi-transparent. Let's leave it set around 50%. Now let's go ahead and close our material editor. We have a base layer that we can apply onto our model. In order to apply it, we can click and drag on the material and drop it right in the viewer, or I can drag directly in the Objects Manager. Let's go ahead and let go, and you'll notice the material has been applied and I can see it in the Objects Manager. If we want to see that what the material looks like, we'll go ahead and load up our preview just by clicking the Render View button. Now I can see that it's transparent, and I can see some of the specular highlights on our model. Now even though we have specular highlights on the model, this is our default light inside of camera. Obviously when you go to export your models or finish your textures, you want to make sure to light the scene. Lighting will drastically change the quality and appearance of your materials. Now, just so we can focus solely on materials, we're not going to jump into working with any other light right now except the default light. Now, we've created one base material, but what if you want to create some other materials? Well, there are a number of presets that are excellent, and they're built into Cinema 4D Lite. Let's go up under the window menu and choose Content Browser. In here I have a bunch of presets. Let's look in the light presets just by clicking on them. Let's open up the options for the light and then go to the material section. Materials are divided up according to classifications. Let's open up the materials option here and look in some of the glass areas. Now here's kind of a cool texture. Notice when I click on it, I get a nice large preview here in my content browser. If I want to apply a texture, we can go ahead and double click. So I'll double click. Now notice it popped up in my Attributes Manager, but it didn't automatically apply to the model. Let's close the content browser and see what's going on. Down here in our Material Manager we have our base material. Let's click and drag on that and drop it directly onto our model. When we let go, it doesn't look like much has changed, but if we go ahead and load up a preview here, you can see it looks different. What's happening is we're blending two textures, and here's an order to the way the textures are applied. Should you decide you want to delete a texture, go ahead and click on the texture in the Object Manager and then press delete. Now when I go ahead and render the view, you can definitely see this looks a lot more like glass. Now what if I want to add a little bit of a highlight to the edge of my model? There's some hidden selection tools where you can select individual areas of your model to apply the texture. Let's rename our base texture by double-clicking on the name. Let's call this highlight. Now let's click and drag the highlight material and apply it to our model. With it applied, notice there's a selection area in the Attributes Manager. When you click in the selection area, I want you to type R1. Let's click out of the selection area to apply that selection. Now when we load up a preview, you can see I have a highlight around the edge, and it's only applied to the rounded part of the model. You can add all kinds of different textures to your models this way. Let's model the face. I'm going to hold down the Command key and click and drag on my glass texture. If you drag to the right, when we let go, it will be all the way on the right. I'm going to double click on this and we'll call this face. Now, just so the texture is a little different than the one that's applied to the body of the model, let's make a change to the material section in the attribute editor. Let's change the color. By default, it's set to this white color. We click on it. Let's go ahead and choose this kind of teal, light green, blue color. You won't notice much of a difference because the brightness is at 20%, so let's go ahead and increase the brightness of our color texture. Okay, now it's started to blend in and we've got a little bit of a change, so let's click and drag and go to apply the face to our logo in the Objects Manager. When I let go, again we have the selection tag. This time instead of typing R1, I want you to type C1. I know you're probably thinking to yourself, how am I going to remember these different selection tags? Well, I've included some of the basic selection codes with my downloadable PDF with some other different shortcuts for After Effects. So you can definitely use that as a reference. Now let's preview what our model looks like by clicking our render view. If we rotate around the scene, we can get a slightly different angle, and as you see that we have a different face from the body and a different highlight. Obviously it's not pretty, but I hope you have a quick understanding as to how you can create materials and apply those materials to your new objects. I leave you by encouraging you to go back to the content browser and browse through all the different materials, because different materials have different setting options and they're all there for you to explore. When you want to add color and detail to your models, you need to explore materials, and in order to apply materials we need to be in Cinema 4D. So let's go to the project panel and make sure we have materials.c4d selected, then press Command E or Control E on Windows to edit the original file. Once in Cinema, go to the upper right corner in the Objects panel. At the top you'll see we have bars etc., which is a null object. If we expand that null, you can see I have a couple of primitive objects that make up these different models, and they're bent with the bend former. Let's go ahead and collapse that. Our H+ logo is an extruded Illustrator file. If we open that up, you'll see we have a null object that contains different splines. This is always a dead giveaway that this was an extrude NURBS object created from an Illustrator file. I bring this up because we can apply textures differently based on the type of model that's in the scene.